the Brendan Sorsby of it all, because that story broke this morning and has major ramifications for all of sports, not just collegiate sports. This is something that if this is how the courts are going to view things, opens up a whole can of worms, opens up a serious Pandora's box. This has been something that has been happening for a while now. Let's pull up our VO, let's see, 23.
Yeah.
23 that'll kind of take us through how we've gotten to this point in the first place. Sorsby was at Cincinnati, transferred to Texas Tech back in January. Very, very highly sought-after quarterback that brought in a major NIL deal. But shortly after arriving at Texas Tech, it is unearthed that he had this gambling problem, this gambling addiction that he has himself spoken to. It is an addiction, and he's going to therapy. He's going to rehab for this.
And again, just to put a number on it, he's saying thousands. He's gambled on thousands of games.
Yes.
And it could be small things. It could be something overseas. It doesn't matter. But the point being, it's like the sheer number of it is staggering just by thinking about it. Like for gambling on something on Sunday night, that's one game, right? Like he's done that 1,000 times over an indiscriminate period of time. We don't necessarily know that part of it, but still.
So as he has gone through this process, the NCAA ruled him ineligible. He then filed an injunction against the NCAA, seeking a TRO, seeking an injunction that will allow him to play this year. And the breaking news that did come this morning, if we can pull up VO number 20, he's been granted that injunction. Ken Curry, the Lubbock County District Judge, saying in this document that Sorsby and his legal team demonstrated that he will suffer a probable, imminent, and irreparable injury if the court does not issue this temporary injunction. And this gets into a lot of legalese. There's a lot of aspects of this, but what makes a case like this easier to make for these lawyers, we've seen this in high school cases here in North Texas, we've seen this in a lot of places in sports, is the immediacy and the fact that you can't replicate or reproduce the opportunity that is before him this fall. If he doesn't play this fall, he doesn't play this fall. There's no way to get that back. In a lot of other walks of life and in a lot of other lawsuits, it would be easier to, well, we'll just replace that with this and you're still made whole, so it's fine. There's no way to do that with a college football season. There's no way to do that with a high school basketball season. So judges do a lot of times, we saw this in the Zeke Elliott case. Yeah. Zeke Elliott got a temporary injunction for a period of time before eventually losing his case, and the NFL was able to levy their 6-game suspension against him. We see this thing happen a lot in this space because of the fact that a sports season is so irreplaceable. But the other factor in all of this is that in order to be granted an injunction, the judge has to decide that you have a likelihood of winning the case itself. If you've got no chance at winning, you're not getting an injunction. The fact that the judge in this case believes that there is at least a chance, and a decent chance, a likelihood is the way that the legalese works here, a likelihood that he's going to win this case is kind of shocking given how black and white the rules are and how pretty clear it seems it is that he's broken those rules. This is a fascinating outcome.
So let's set the rest of the table here and pull up VO 21 here. This is the from Kirby Hocutt, the Texas Tech athletic director. And obviously they're going to side with Sorsby in this. They want him on the field in September. So this is kind of in support of that. We do not believe that the circumstances of Brendan's case warranted permanent ineligibility. As he returns to our football program, we remain committed to supporting Brendan's recovery and ensuring his compliance with the court's order. There was a little bit after that talking about the process of helping him heal either through therapy and keeping counselors on staff and all that kind of stuff. But the other side of this is the NCAA. And here's the NCAA statement. NCAA strongly disagrees with the court's ruling in Sorsby's case and is deeply concerned about the damaging, far-reaching, and broadly destabilizing ramifications of this outcome, which undermines and corrupts the integrity of sports, which is kind of what we set the table of this entire thing a couple weeks ago when it first broke that he was filing an injunction. that this is existential, and it's existential because the NCAA is one of the only institutions across all sports right now that has drawn a hard line against gambling. Still, they have literally it was either against DraftKings. Again, I get DraftKings and FanDuel confused all the time because they're basically
the same thing,
interchangeable. But they've had
Pepsi and Coke.
Sure, but they've had court filings against them for being too close to their brand and they're too close to their product. They keep trying to separate the two. What I find fascinating is when we look at the NCAA as a whole, and granted, like the NCAA has done a lot of crazy stuff in the sense that people that should have been paid were not. And thankfully now we're in a circumstance where athletes are getting their due in terms of NIL and what their current value is on the open market. It's been a long time coming, and the NCAA deserves to have been brought to the woodshed on that front. But in so doing, they have lost power and authority on a legal standing that makes it difficult to enforce things like this that protect kids and protect their sport from unsundry natures of gambling in general. It's not saying like what we do whenever we sit there and we play fantasy football just for fun or anything on those lines, like $5 to your friends and create a pot and all that kind of stuff. That's relatively acceptable. It's kind of normalized in today's culture, but gambling and essentially putting your livelihood on the line in these predatory environments, because they are predatory. If it wasn't profitable for these places, they wouldn't exist. It's literally a money swell for them. What I feel like is lost in all of this is that consequences matter, right? Like that's the whole reason why this exists. And I understand the argument that we got into right before the show on he grew up in an environment that allowed gambling to metastasize in his consciousness in a way that is different how we grew up, where the Black Sox 8 Man Out was a movie that came out, but the Pete Rose scandal was obviously the big headline news. We grew up in an era in which it was blacklisted. It's not as blacklisted as it was, but it's still damaging to you. It's still damaging to your brand. And I do think that knowing what the consequences are going into it and still doing it and still trying to find a way around the system sends the wrong message to everybody.
I think there have been a few instances over the span of time, really within the NCAA's existence, that have been kind of these landmark rulings that have profound long-term implications on student athletes forever going forward. Obviously, I mean, think about, I remember when NIL was basically granted, and Olivia Dunn is the first girl that comes to, or the first person that comes to mind. Like, she has built an empire out of being a student athlete at LSU, a gymnast on, championship winning team. Like, with gymnasts, I think it's different as far as like how much time she got competing and whatnot, but like still she's the most famous LSU athlete ever, and that all came because of an NCAA.
But it's true,
right? Maybe not the most decorated in terms of
medals.
And
whatnot. I think your interpretation of the gymnastics of it all is accurate. Yeah. She wasn't terribly involved in.
She's
the
on one of the best
those
teams,
titles.
Right?
It was a great team.
Think about
she was
Jordan Childs. Who's the Auburn gymnast?
Suni Lee.
Thank you. Those are Olympic athletes who are around Livy's age. Livy's undoubtedly more online famous than the Olympic athlete or the Olympic gymnast. Yeah. So that's kind of what I mean by, I'm not trying to diminish her talent. No, I'm just saying
but I think you're right, because I think she's probably more famous than Joe Burrow.
No, easily, yeah. Especially in
kind of wild.
By today's fame standards, more people are recognized like on the street because someone saw them on a social media app than because someone saw them on a movie or playing a game.
And again, not to cast stones, but like the entire ruling centered around a swimmer who brought it to the court. It was Grant House, who no one in this room knows who Grant House is except for me. I'm just going to throw that out there. So
factual.
Yeah, but
not gonna argue.
he brought that to the court. He's part of the reason why this, and it's opened a Pandora's box.
Yes. And sorry, not to diverge us down that path, but I'm just saying, like, that was one of those rulings that altered the course of college athletics and the lives of student athletes forevermore. She is now a graduated student who is has a totally different life than she probably would have had it not been for the NIL ruling.
Right.
I think this is one of those decisions that has been made, and I think the NCAA sees the ramifications of it, and is why they put out such a strong statement in this case, because this is one of those things that if it kind of goes through, again, the injunction is kind of like a, hey, we still have to make a finite decision on this down the road. To your point about the immediacy of this, Kessler, who's representing Sorsby in this case, demanded that a decision on this injunction was made by, or requested the ruling to be made by June 15th, because that would have been a week before the deadline for Sorsby to apply for the NFL supplemental draft if he remained ineligible to play for Tech this fall. So there was basically a deadline that they were operating under because, there had to be a decision made. He has 1 season left to play college football. And to my point about Libby's life being altered post-college, like his life will dramatically probably be altered. If he has one of the best seasons, say he's a Heisman candidate, and he has a good team around him at Tech, that could alter where he goes come next year's NFL draft. Now,
but that's the kind of the question I want to harp on here. It's like the NCAA is setting a precedent because by all accounts right now they are a professional league. They can try and pretend otherwise, but guys are getting paid to perform on the field. That's about as close to professional as you can get, just a difference of hand-drawn contracts, right? That's kind of where we are. We just want a little bit more exposure on that side. But Sorsby right now, if he goes into the supplemental draft, the NFL is looking at this, and do they want that to be brought in, right? Like, they're kind of complicit in this. The NCAA has been all but a feeder system for the NFL for a number of years, or for essentially its entire lifespan. But inviting this in and allowing NFL players to look at this and sit there and say, you have a gambling problem, you do what, 2.5 games, have a college career, and then come back in? What does that say to anybody that's caught later on? The NFL has just as much as stake in this as anybody. For a guy that will at least try to enter the league here either this year or the next year.
Is he an adult?
Yeah.
Did he mess up?
Depends who you ask.
Is he being held accountable?
He broke a rule.
Yes.
Is he being held accountable for his actions?
That's the question.
If this were alcohol or drugs instead of gambling, would we be having a different conversation?
That's also the same kind of slippery slope because I think alcohol and drugs have a very different connotation than it did. Marijuana, for instance, is a wildly different soapbox than it used to be. There are medicinal properties in a way, and it's socially acceptable in a way that it was not 20 years ago.
Then take that one out, because I think her question is valid, and bring it back to, all right, alcohol and hard drugs, or even just hard drugs, because I don't think that
connotation there, yeah.
Yes, I don't know that alcohol is more problematic than weed, but it's also not as problematic as our drugs. So I think her point in all of this is, if this were any other activity, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong here, if he's held accountable to whatever degree, and some may feel like he's not being held accountable enough, but if this is the way it actually goes, if this injunction from today is what carries through the season, if there is no further appeal, if there is no further outcome here, and he is barred from playing the first 2 games of the season, but then can play the remainder of the season.
And then goes on to play in the NFL.
Right.
And, I mean, as a parent, I spend a lot of time talking to my kids about the consequences of their actions, and then it's hard to look at this and go, okay, but don't ignore that one. This one doesn't count. Because we don't want to ruin his future.
Right, that's the
but
thing
he
to
ruined
me.
his own future.
Right, that's the thing. Like, and I understand. Like, Mike Vick did his time. He went to jail, came back, was accepted back into the league, but he suffered tremendously for it. Should he have filed an injunction that he was going to be under mental duress by going to jail under this? Because that's essentially the equivalent. Like, he needs to do time for this. I think the question is whether or not 2.5 games is a representative sum. And to me, based off of...
I thought it was just the 2.
Well, 2.5, either way. Yeah. I mean, in 90 days, will he be able to... Well, I say 90. Add another 14. So in roughly 100 games, will he be able to suit up for Texas Tech?
According to this right now, yes.
Right. But that's because the legal system takes so long to get through these processes. Is that fair based off of the history of gambling in sports in general? And That's kind of the question. It's like whether the history should inform this point or this point is the infraction point that Michelle was referring to. Because they are setting a precedent right now, not just for the NCAA, which already is losing power by the second, but for professional sports leagues in general.
Why does the NFL need to punish this kid? To go back to Kelly, because again, I don't know if this is where she was going or not, but it's where my head went when she asked the question. If the NCAA, kind of, more so this court basically, but it's basically the court saying, okay, the NCAA, you're allowed to punish him for 2 games and nothing further. So the NCAA is going to punish him for 2 games. He will have been, at least in some form or fashion, I think many would agree probably too little, but he will be punished in some form or fashion for what he did. If this were any other offense, would the NFL then feel like they need to come in and secondarily double punish this kid?
I'm not. My point was not necessarily anything about the NFL punishing him. It's that he is going to go on to most likely be drafted by a team in the NFL. He is going to be able to play the majority of his season, go and get drafted by somebody, and have a career. And this is just going to be swept to the sidelines. And to Andrew's point, what kind of message does that send to the kids that are going to come up behind him? Is that it doesn't matter. Do whatever you want. If you're good, you get to still play.
And that's been the NFL's message for a while. Like, if we're being totally honest.
All of sports message for basically all of time.
Paul Hornung cried about gambling and was let back in. He's still in the Hall of Fame. So, like, the
Pete
NFL
Rose would like to enter the chat.
Exactly. But the NFL is its own separate monster on this side of thing. And the only reason I bring that up is in today's gambling climate, and it's not saying that he will be punished for it, but he doesn't have to be drafted. In the same way that other players have been blackballed by the league and kept out for certain reasons, on sundry to whatever. If the talent is there, they'll make an exception. Someone will obviously make an exception. But the league is no stranger to basically all 32 owners saying, he's too hot to touch. We'll not go there. That's whether or not that is outlined as a statement in the same way the NCAA is, they can draw the hard line through quiet backroom channels just as easily.
I mean, they certainly can, and they might. You know, the NFL may decide, we're good. It's not entirely impossible. I think it also depends probably on whether or not he does play this year. Yeah. Because
I don't think
his time at Cincinnati was good, but I don't think if he were that good, if he were that highly sought after, he could have entered the draft
this year. Yeah.
2 months ago.
And I'll be totally honest here. I watch college football on a pretty regular basis. I didn't hear about him until this. He was not on my radar as someone, this is someone to watch out for. So it's not saying that's
he had a really strong year at Cincinnati. There's a reason why he was the number 1 quarterback in the transfer portal. He's not nothing.
Right.
But again, if he were, and listen, NIL is part of the mitigator in all of this. You know, if this were 10 years ago and NIL money wasn't a possibility, he probably would be in the draft this year.
Yeah.
But you know what? Shoot, I can make $4 or $5 million, whatever it is. The number's never been nailed down, but it's probably somewhere in that ballpark. All right, I'll play one more year of college ball and go make another big bag of money, and then I'll go to the NFL.
Hit a couple parlays, double my take. And
oh, man, come on.
I mean, come on.
We want to get to Cowboys here in a moment, but we continue to go round and round about this Brendan Sorsby discussion, and I'm sorry, this thing deserves a lot of discussion because there is so much to it. And one of the outcomes of this day, to me, is the NCAA has zero power.
Yes.
Whatever power they thought they had, whatever power was there for an extended period of time. Shoot, there was a time not that long ago where if you gave a kid too much cream cheese on his bagel, you were going to get suspended for 3 games or you were going to have wins negate.
Yes.
That is gone. That is absolutely gone.
And for good reason.
You want to play a 7th year? Go get an injunction. You want to gamble on sports and still play this fall? Go get an injunction. they can't seem to enforce anything at all.
Because the legal system takes too long too. Like, again, we're saying in 100 days. Will the court even have a chance to hear it in 100 days? That's part of this.
And they have gone down the path of relinquishing power, and that was no more obvious than when the NIL deals were agreed upon, then when they had to pay all the people back. And we've now gotten to this point where, we know that the conferences are now trying to self-govern because there is no overarching governing body. And we've seen that trend take place over the last, especially like 5 years. It's only continuing to go that direction. And this is another instance of where this ruling, and that's kind of what I said earlier, however it ultimately ends up, will have long-term ramifications on the sport.
Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, tweeted a little bit ago, there is no better example of why targeted intervention from Congress is necessary. Yeah. When you have schools and deep-pocketed supporters willing to look the other way on the glaring integrity threat of betting on your own team, and judges whose rulings effectively strip away our ability to stop them, only Congress can equip the NCAA to apply this common sense rule to everyone fairly and consistently. The Protect College Sports Act would empower the NCAA. Now he's getting into his legalese and politicking and trying to get this act passed. But
ultimately, the NCAA is a faulty institution. They brought this upon themselves with how they handled most everything prior to this. I don't feel sorry for the NCAA. I feel sorry for the Pandora's box that their actions created through doing this. Because they lost power elsewhere, they have power nowhere. And that to me is like, you're going to take, as Michelle said, the super conferences that are going to create their own professional league. I'm curious when the split is going to come, when these teams that are affiliated with universities are now their own entities. Because at a certain point, as much as it is the front door to UT, for instance, the Longhorns football team can just go off and do their own thing.
There's a reason why the NCAA was instituted in the first place. Like, there has always been a need for regulation, overarching regulation, because not everything is on an equal playing field in college athletics. The fact that the NCAA has deteriorated over the last couple of years, or at least they've reduced their amount of power, that has been detrimental to the sport in general, and I'm talking college football, but it applies to every other sport as well.
Specifically Olympic sports, because a lot of the funding from football, basketball, those primary sports would trickle down as a result of it, and now those smaller sports are resulting in booster funds, and the support just isn't there. Like, that's the reality of it. So you're losing a fabric of sport culture in America as a result of this.
Yeah.